they don't seem to like it either when I insult the way the system was designed. It was leading me to believe that the people working on the help, the service help, might have had something to do with it. Of course, they can't say anything bad about it, but that's probably what it is. Actually, they probably feel uncomfortable. But it's like it was so poorly designed. With Robinhood, it's like if you forget your password or whatever, they just send you an email, confirm your phone number, and confirm your social security number. I think it's all they do. With interactive brokers, you got to call them, you got to go for this and that, you got to use the website and the app at the same time, and then you have to keep using the desktop and the app. Like, I'm so thankful that they do help you, but it's like there's so many unnecessary steps in the process. It's like, sure, like, identity theft is real, things like that. So you definitely want to confirm the email. You definitely want to confirm the phone number. And if that's not possible, you might have to do additional verification. Fine. I have all of that information. I can verify the phone. I can verify the email. I can verify my social. I can verify my date of birth. I can verify my full name. I can verify my mother's name. It's like at the end of the day, it's like if somebody stole your phone number, hacked into your phone number, hacked into your email, you just got to stop clicking on shady links. And if you're clicking on shady links, you shouldn't be dealing with online brokerage accounts. That's largely what it comes down to. You silly goof. You really shouldn't be doing it. And I would actually strongly recommend that. If you're an elderly person, do all of your financial transactions in person. If you're retired, right? If you have the time and the energy, it might be hard to find the energy when you're older, but you definitely have the time to go into the bank, to go visit your local brokerage if you're nearby one. Or I would even potentially consider delegating your brokerage account to somebody you really trust in your family. Now, that might be difficult because you don't necessarily want to know how much money you have. One possible solution to that would be to have them look over the brokerage account, look over the website, make sure everything is good. Also, another good thing too is have like a grandchild or something who is very tech savvy, like bookmark your brokerage website so you don't click on an unfortunate link, to give you the phone numbers from the official websites so you're not like clicking on phone numbers from like phishing sites, from other from scammers and data thieves. It is very one of the things a lot of the elderly don't realize is just there have always been bad people around, but these days bad people have access to your computer if you click on the wrong links. They can watch you when you're not even aware of it. They can turn your camera on when your computer is on. They can see everything you can see on the computer. All you gotta do is give them access to your computer. And oftentimes it'll come up as a pop-up and you won't even know. And if you're not reading the pop-ups, if you're not reading what's on there, it'll be very, very easy for them to get your information. And by the way, if you are older especially, but if you're younger too, one of the things that we really need to do, and that's something that I obviously make an effort to do, but it's not always easy, especially with things like dyslexia, you have to definitely, you have to read. Reading saves you so much extra effort. You have to read what things say. And it can get confusing for sure. It would be easier to have someone just walk you through it. The problem is that if you want someone to walk you through every single thing, there's just not going to be enough people with enough energy to be able to exert all their attention to you 24/7. And that's why sometimes you just got to do that. You just got to read things. It's not because the world hates you. In fact, the reason those instructions are often there, and sometimes they make them more like interactive brokerage does make their website and their app a little bit convoluted, and like reading through it is fairly difficult. Even their desktop and everything, it's fairly convoluted. I would say to a lesser extent, Uphold is kind of similar in that regard. But look at Robinhood. It's pretty straightforward. The instructions are there, and the instructions are very straightforward. And just a little bit of reading, get right through it. There are a lot of businesses that make their instructions very convoluted and hard to read. There are also a lot of businesses that make their instructions very straightforward, very clear, very concise, very simple. And so you can't assume that all businesses are going to be convoluted in the way they give their instructions and their directions. Many will. Let's be honest. Many of these businesses will be like that, but it's not going to be all of them. And it's worth at least attempting to read the instructions at times because there's just not enough people with enough energy in the world to give you 24-hour attention for those kind of things. You need to rely on other people. You need to rely on yourself, not on other people all the time. Hi, Emma. You definitely need to rely on yourself. Just build it. Now, one of the things I've noticed working in retail is one of the concerning things is not everybody does know how to read, and some people don't know how to read English, and that is definitely a concern, by the way. And that's a special case, and that's of course why we need to be understanding when people don't read instructions, because a lot of people just never learn to read, and that's something we definitely need to watch out for and be careful and make sure that they are taken care of. But if you can read, it's sometimes very good to read when possible. Now, again, looking at Interactive Broker's website, it's very convoluted, so sometimes reading through the instructions isn't always helpful. But yeah, that is something. I know, baby. I know. It's hard. But yeah, I know. But one of the things I've learned to read. Because at first, when I first started working in retail, I was thinking, like, these people know how to read. And I was getting all angry and puffed up, and I eventually realized I don't think all these people do know how to read. And if they can read, I don't know if they can read well. Then you have people with poor eyesight. Maybe they can't afford glasses or contacts or anything. Maybe they're in such poverty they can't afford glasses. And then you have the people who can read but not in English. And like the more and more you kind of get involved in it, you realize there are a lot of these people, a lot more than you would think, that just simply can't read for whatever reason. They're not able to read, and it's not all. You don't know what led up to that. It could have been a number of things that led up to that, but a lot of them can't read. And it's not that they're necessarily being malicious or trying to hurt anybody. They literally can't read. They need help, and they need someone to help them to learn how to read and to learn how to do these things. And that's just what it comes down to a lot of the times. They're not necessarily trying to hurt anybody. They're not necessarily trying to be a bad person. A lot of them just literally just don't know how to read. And when you really digest that and understand what that really implies and means, you can love them instead of hate them, because it's not the circumstances that led up to their illiteracy might not have been their fault. In fact, studying for my graduate degree, one of the things we studied was the rates of illiteracy, throughout the world. Now, of course, illiteracy is definitely bad in places like the Philippines. Well, actually, I think the Philippines has a lack of data on that. But in the USA, it's really bad as well. Like the USA, I think is rated. I think in one of the papers it was actually an amalgamation of sources, because I think it was on a government website, or it might have been on an organizational website, but I think it quoted government data, or I think it used government data. But I think the USA in world literacy rates was 35th. Now, 35th out of all the nations in the world might not sound like the worst case scenario, but for a country that has the kind of status as the USA, 35th is pretty low, right? South Korea is number 1 in world literacy, but we're number 35, I think it was, if I remember that source correctly, and I think we're 31st or 32nd. In another analysis of overall world education, with the Philippines, I think we were 32nd, and I think the Philippines were 62nd, something like that. Now, clearly, the Philippines is way worse in terms of world education. The Philippines is also a third world country, right? So we got to keep that in mind, right? You're kind of comparing apples and oranges there. They're not the same thing. And of course, there's been a lot of talk about how do we solve the issue. I don't know that there's a way to solve it. I think we have to stop
I think we do have to stop. I don't know. I think we need to find ways for those who do have the intellectual capacities that other students may not have, maybe often due to circumstances, but those who do have it, whether it's from circumstances or whether it's from sheer willpower, I think we need to give them more opportunities to grow and thrive, because I don't know that, the more I think about it, the more I reflect on it, and the more I've experienced it, you know, and just observed other people, I don't think there's always a way to save everybody. Even when it comes to eternal salvation, not everybody is going to be saved. It seems pretty clear by the scriptures, right? And when it comes to saving in an educational sense, I don't think everybody is going to be able to be saved. Like this idea of no child left behind, I think is unrealistic. I think what we really need to do is focus on the students who are able to put in the effort, who are able to comprehend and push them further, because they're the ones I think we need to be focusing on. Of course, we need to focus on the students who can't, who are struggling but still have the will to learn, or somewhere in them. We don't give up on students, but at the same time, I think to a certain extent we have to say, there's only so much we can do. And there are some students who I think will eventually be left behind. And sometimes it's because of their own lack of willpower, and sometimes it's because of their own incapacities. But, you consider somebody who has severe brain injuries. Obviously, you want them to learn as much as possible. But, if they have such severe brain injuries that they can barely comprehend simple mathematics, you're not going to expect them to go on to become, a calculus professor at a local community college, right? You don't expect that outcome. That doesn't mean that you leave them behind or you give up on them, in the sense that you just never stop teaching them or trying to teach them. But it does mean that you might not focus as much on mathematical learning with somebody who has, a brain injury, can barely comprehend 2 plus 4. You don't typically, you probably wouldn't exert the same amount of energy in teaching them, trying to teach them more advanced mathematics. That doesn't mean you would give up on them or wouldn't teach them at all, but the idea is you kind of have to meet them at their level. And in a relatively diversified classroom, when you have some students who are doing exceptionally well, you can definitely modify your plans to accommodate everybody. But I think one of the things that gets left behind a lot is that the talented students often get ignored in terms of opportunities and in terms of their actual learning and growth. With a lot of teachers focusing on just teaching the whole class more holistically, when that is very unrealistic when you have classrooms that have people with IEPs and things like that. It doesn't mean that the students who are struggling should not be addressed. It just means, what I'm trying to say is, I think that all the students should be given. I think the students who are showing the most promise in terms of what they understand or are capable of understanding, even if the grades don't reflect it, I think need to be a major focus. And that is something that's actually entering the conversation more, because you do have this in the conversation more, where gifted students are finally starting to be considered more often. But even so, I noticed that students with things like IEPs and stuff are often the ones that are the primary focus, where gifted students are often left out, which I think is a major, major problem when we are trying to actually have, if we're actually going to talk about equity, if we're actually going to talk about real equity, ignoring the gifted students is a major problem in the school systems.